as you see from the agenda, I don't think we have an extensive meeting tonight. But before we get started with the agenda, I want to make 2 changes to accommodate 2 chairpersons who need to make other commitments. So I'd like to take, if you look at the agenda, in the item 6, chairperson reports, I'd like to adjust 2 items. I'd like to have the last 2 items, transportation and public safety, and the youth, education, and cultural affairs. I'd like to move those committees up as the first 2 committees to present this evening, and it will follow along with the next committee being economic development, and it will follow through. So if there's no objections to that, when I get to that, those will be the modifications that we would adopt for this evening's agenda. So with that, I am Lenny Singletary. Thanks to the board members of Community Board 2, I serve as chair of Community Board 2. Our vice chairs are Mr. Leonard Jordan. That's the smiling face you see on the camera waving now. And then allow me to have our second vice chair introduce herself so she can pronounce her name and we all start to say it correctly. So Barbara.
Good evening, Chair Singletary. It's Barbara Zoller-Bringer, Zoller like dollar. So thank you.
And so Barbara Zoller-Bringer serves as our second vice chair. And then our wonderful secretary is Ms. Jessica Thurston. And so now you've met the leadership of Community Board 2. And then as we go through the rest of tonight's agenda, we'll have the chairs introduce themselves, and those who have a vice chair will introduce their vice chairs. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt tonight's amended agenda. So moved by Ms. Freibush, second by Mr. Meyer. Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes from December 22nd? Do we have any noted edits or corrections? Hearing none, I would ask that if you have subsequent corrections that you please submit them to the board office and we'll make those immediate changes. But hearing none, I entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from December 22nd. Mr. Jordan, second by Mr. Flournoy. Thank you. Let me jump into the chairperson's report. So a couple of things, and a lot of this, a lot of what I'm about to mention is a credit to my ability to work cohesively and collaboratively with Taya as our district manager in the way that she has elevated things that are happening in the office, but also to have a second set of eyes, right? When you have someone who's been doing the job for such a long time, there are things that you just kind of put into motion. Having Taya on with a new set of eyes, that things that we're learning and we're seeing differently. So one of the things that we've done in the past, maybe with not a certain level of consistency, is that when we get the preliminary budget from the city, it includes the city agency's responses to our district needs statements. And we've not always, with level of consistency, had public hearings so that the community knows the things that we're advocating for, some of the things that we want to make as a priority. So with that, we're going to have a public meeting. Again, not a hearing, just a public meeting next Monday, the 30th, between 6 and 7:30 p.m. And we will be ending the meeting 7:30 p.m. on the dot to go through the agency responses to our district needs. And we'll have it so that the public can join. It'll be just an information session. And Taya will be able to make sure that all the board members and the public is aware. And then we'll have a dialogue about what those items are. And so, as is a custom and per the charter that we already adhere to, we're all required to submit an annual statement. I think this gives it another opportunity for the community to perhaps learn a little bit more about the process. Perhaps for some of our new board members, learn a little bit more about the process. And then some of us who may be a little bit more experienced, maybe there'll be some new things that come to life for all of us. But I just advise each of you to keep that on your calendar. Again, Monday, the 30th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., we'll have a public meeting to go over the preliminary budget and the items that have been responded to from the agencies for our district needs statement. The next thing I want to mention is that on Friday, February 3rd, at 3 p.m., I'm inviting the chairs and vice chairs of the Parks and Transportation Committees, chairs and vice chairs of the Parks and Transportation Committee, to join me on the invitation that was submitted by Bridges for People. And what they'd like for us to do is take a walk through around improving the conditions, particularly around some of the areas that could serve as park space for portions underneath the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. And so while the invitation was extended to Tay and I do want to extend it to the respective chairpersons and vice chairs, because, you know, that's where most of the dialogue and the conversation is going to take place at those respective committees. And so those of you who can and will, if you can make it, it is on Friday, February 3rd at 3 p.m. We'll coordinate through email or some form of communication where we're going to meet to enjoy and partner with the organization called Bridges for People. That's who requested the meeting. And then we'll walk through it and get that information, learn a little bit more about what we can do, and then find possibly new areas that we can advocate in the realm of park space. Let me just pause there. I have other things I want to report on, but let me just pause there to see if there are any questions on those two additional items to your respective calendars. Great. The next thing I want to report on is, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read the op-ed from our new borough president, Antonio Reynoso, but there was an op-ed where he talked about the power of community boards and how we can engage in ways that make sure the community boards send a highlight. And for those who've not seen it, it is in the chat from the Brooklyn paper. Thank you, Taya. But for those of you who may not be familiar with the op-ed, what he speaks about, amongst other things, is the way you handle different motion types. And for those of you who've known me for such a long time, you've known long before this borough president was elected and the job that he's doing about educating the community and the work that he's doing to represent Brooklyn. I've spoken multiple times about how you can accept a position or deny a position with conditions. And so I ask each of you to, as chairs and co-chairs, to really familiarize yourself with that process. Perhaps this op-ed is a refresher to do so, but we've also prepared a refresher sheet. So Taya, if you're able, would you share your screen and put up the refresher sheet if you can? If not, we'll look at it another time. Perfect. So as we go through this, I want anybody to kind of refamiliarize yourself, and we can distribute this as well. It's already in the Google Drive if you haven't seen it. But typically, you recommend something with an approval, yay, nay, move forward, fine. Then there are times we recommend something with disapproval, yay, no, fine. But we have more tools at our disposal. And so if we, and I'm going to use this as an illustration point. I don't know if there's any way you can measure this, but from an illustration perspective, if something comes before our respective committees and therefore the board, and let's say 70% of what's presented is something that we can agree on, we think it's beneficial for the community and the neighborhoods we represent. Well, let's say 30 of it doesn't really work for us. Then we have an opportunity to be explicit, be communicative, and direct with the agencies by recommending something for approval with conditions, right? And the reason I say this as a reminder is this isn't something that's only applicable to land use, where a lot of times you see where it comes out. This is something that is presented to us and can be utilized by every committee. I don't care what it is, right? If you want a dog run, and the dog run is, I like 60% of what's being submitted, but 40% I don't like. Let's look at this as perhaps another tool to communicate to the agencies our advisory position on the particular item at hand. Conversely, if there are things that we don't like, so let's say 70% of what is being presented we don't like, but 30% we do like. If you just say disapprove and no one's aware of what you liked about the proposal, perhaps we're missing an opportunity to advocate for something or put on a radar for some agency the portions of what's presented that we do like, in which case recommending disapproval with conditions is applicable. So again, this is just really more of a refresher. As colleagues, we've all been kind of doing this for a long time. So I don't do this to chastise anyone or to say what we're doing is wrong. Let me be really clear. But I also want to remind us that we have more tools. So as we enter in 2023 and more things are going to come before us, some things of perhaps a complex nature, know that we're not boxed into yes, no. We as the community board have the right and the tools before us to be able to demonstrate what we do like and what we don't like. And so I just, share this as a reminder. And for those of us who are familiar with this as chairs and co-chairs, please continue to keep this top of mind. Those of us who are not familiar with this, I ask that you try to get yourself familiarized with the reference sheets. And then at the end of the day, no matter what you choose as chairs and co-chairs in conjunction with your respective committee members, keep up the great job. I don't think anyone's complaining about the work that comes out of community board too. So again, let me pause before I go to my other two items, but wanted to see if anybody had any questions on the refresher, quick, brief refresher on motion types. Great. Let's move on to the next item. So the next item is a little bit different. I think it's something, again, that we're learning. Different things bring about different leaderships. Different leadership bring about different interpretation. So when we get applications that come to the office, particularly for liquor licenses, right? On-premise liquor licenses. Historically, what has been the practice is that they had to be printed out, put in a package, and submitted to the chair, co-chair of the HES committee, right? But that is something I think is more of a practice. It's not a requirement. There's nothing that says you have to print it out and have a hard copy. And I think in this environment where we are now, learning to be more sustainable and conscious, thanks to Taya and some of her next level research, we realized that we don't have to print out those forms. We can definitely email them to the chairs and co-chairs and respective committees. Essentially, we do that now because you already get a packet or you get a link to information that's electronically communicated. What SLA has communicated to us, and let me not make the assumption everybody knows what SLA is with the State Liquor Authority. What they've communicated to us is that there was an amendment allowed to provide the 30-day notice by the state alcohol beverage and control law, specifically speaking, that allows for email, the better use of electronic and digital communication. And so that we have the ability to communicate that way over email. The reason this is important is because now that we start getting into the world of cannabis management and this new agency, and not to conflate the two, because cannabis management is still something I think is a work in progress. We're still seeing where smoke shops are popping up and some are legal, not legal. That's a whole process that's still working itself out. But there are going to be applications and things that are going to be required to us or required of us from the Office of Cannabis Management and their application process, as well as the Office of Addiction Services and Support for their applications. And they're more commonly going to be communicated to us via email as well. So I want all of us to start to think about how receiving applications and receiving requests may have a different look and feel to it, because they may not be part of a hard copy or may not be presented as business as usual, but that's not to deny the ability to do the work that's required of us. I think in some ways it'll make us more efficient. It clearly will make the district office more efficient. And so I just want everyone to be reminded or made aware that there are going to be different ways that we communicate to you that are not limited to just the executive order that allows us to meet virtually. These are going to be business as usual methods to communicate and get applications approved by the community board. So again, don't want anybody to think that if you get something electronically that is invalid. It is quite valid. And then the last thing I want to mention is, well, actually a few things I want to mention. Some of these are just FYIs, but we are going to engage again in another health fair. I think those of you who had the opportunity to work or take part in last year's health fair led by the HES committee, under the leadership of Mr. Brandon Smith, Nicole McKnight, and Latrell Marceau, saw how successful that event was last year. And we had the wonderful photography of our very own YECA committee member, Nicholas Ferreira, to make the day special. We're going to do that again this year. And I don't want to give too much in that. I think Brandon will make a comment about that momentarily, but we're going to do it again. And last year was an outstanding event. I think we're going to create a new word in the dictionary that makes whatever that word is, we haven't figured it out yet, that's better than outstanding. But we'll get there because I think the planning process has been kicked off. I like the consideration, the engagement of the meetings under Brandon's leadership, but I also like the collaboration and the thoughtfulness that's including more board members and more community members. Let me be clear. Community Board 2 is co-branding this, but this is not a designated official community board event. These are representatives, as all of us are, as members of Community Board 2 that want to find a way to give back and do something that's meaningful, and this health fair represents that. So just wanted to bring that up. I will be inviting, as part of a change for 2023, and this is really more of a notice and announcement to Bill Flanoy and Denise Peterson as respective chair and co-chairs of the HES committee, of the Economic Development and Employment Committees. I had a conversation the other day with a representative from a local bid. And what was interesting to me was some of the challenges that some of the merchants who make up the bids are dealing with. And given that our district has, I think, 7 bids, there are 7 bids that sit within the Community Board 2 catchment area. I've asked Tia to work with you both as the chair and co-chair to make sure that every bid has an agenda item for your respective committees. And so you'll, your meetings take place, you'll see an invitation from an agenda item and an invitation from those respective bid leaders to come and talk to you about what those local issues are. You'll be able to hear from them. If there's ways that we can provide assistance, great. If there are ways we can't, it's okay. But they'll have the platform. And then that still leaves you enough time for other agenda items and other meetings where if you need to partner with another committee or if the topics that are unique that you want to speak to, it won't. So that'll continue to take place as well. Or I should say, I should introduce that as well so that the bids have a platform. And then I believe that's it. I think I've covered a lot. I wanted to make sure that everybody understood what's happening, how we're going to do things going forward. And then just new ways of things that we can make our office and our engagement with the community better. And so that concludes my report. Again, I'll pause to see if anybody has any questions. I gave what I think is somewhat of an extensive chairperson's report versus my normal pattern. But these are things that I wanted to kick off so we could start the 2023 year of leadership and engagement in a different way. Hopefully everyone finds it beneficial and mutually beneficial, that is. So great, thank you. Your engaged look on the screen is encouraging. And so now we'll move on to committees to report, and we'll start with transportation and public safety.
Good evening, everyone, and happy New Year if you haven't been told that before. My leadership team includes Esther Blount, who's my co-chair, and John Quint, the long-serving secretary of our committee. We had a lively meeting, as we tend to do, last Thursday. The Bridges for People that Lenny mentioned, which is an affiliate of Transportation Alternatives, made a presentation, and Taya, if you wouldn't mind, could you put the presentation up for a second? There is a park called Trinity Park that's just east of the entrance of the Manhattan Bridge. As you go down to the second or third slide, you get a much better picture of it. Next slide. Next slide. Hey, stop there with the old time picture. All right. This is the way it was originally built. All right. It was originally built as a park just east of the off ramps of the of the Manhattan Bridge. And as you can see, it's a nice looking park. It's a total of 6 acres. It's a 6-acre park. But what they came to us about was a 4-acre section of the park that they noticed that Taya, I believe, is highlighting right now. The problem is really simple. The park has become derelict. It is used by people to park on, and if you go down to the second picture below, you get there. It's just stop there. You get an idea of what this park is used for. It is used as a dumping area, and it is used as a parking area. And you can see if you look across the center of the stream, there's a dirt road. That dirt road, according to one of the people, was a road that was created by wreckers, tow trucks that were staging there to remove cars originally from the Manhattan Bridge and the BQE. And over the years, they beat a path through, and then people use now it to park, to dump things, and it's a mess. All right. And this was originally presented to the Park Committee, and the Park Committee transferred it over to our committee because they wanted our help review of how to get those cars off, and also to look at the streetscape to make it more pedestrian friendly. And if you go down to one of the pictures, this is one of those that's there's the road, there's the dump, there's cars parked all over the place, and that they've also asked stop. Go down one more. Stop right there. That they've asked us to ask DOT to look to see if they can either get these cars off and to close one of the roadways on the left-hand picture, to close the left-hand road that shows cars parked and blocked on as well. So we had a lively discussion of this, and the committee voted 13-0. Everybody was there, except that one person left before we did the vote. They asked us to ask the DOT and Parks Department to erect barriers to prevent illegal parking in any segment of Trinity Park, and to approve pedestrian access to and through the park in accordance with the proposal outlined. And in my minutes, it says by transportation alternatives, but it's by the Bridges for People and by the local city councilman, by Lincoln Ressler, has agreed to this as well. And we agree that should be done. I must add something personally about this. This area is used to park by police, fire, and a lot of police and fire, but by a lot of other people. I really urge, before they close it off, that whoever's going to do this, Parks and DOT, meet with fire and police to try to get them to move the cars out. One of the problems we have is originally, as you know, Abolitionist Square Park, or Abolitionist, I forget what, I call it Abolitionist Square. It's Abolitionist Square, I believe, was supposed to have a parking lot underneath it that was supposed to be significantly for city employees. All right, that we need to rationalize the parking there, and to make sure that we don't antagonize both the police and fire and create a problem for ourselves. And one of the things that I noticed, and I sent it along, there's a resident of CB2 has been complaining about people parking illegally in the center of Adams Street. That person has received both harassment and threats for his continued opposition to illegal parking. we need to rationalize the parking here so that, there's a super pumper there, there's the police department there, that a lot of those parkers, not all, a lot of those parkers are people who just learned they can just park, that they have, when they make the changes, that they try to give them significant parking spaces as well. So all the parking, all the use of the park and the redoing of the park, we believe that's a parks committee and council member and the Bridges for People stuff to work on. All that we're recommending, all that the transportation committee is recommending is the erect of the barricades to prevent illegal parking, which we believe is a DOT responsibility, and the responsibility of the local councilman to get the funds for, and to improve pedestrian access to and around and through the park in accordance with the proposal outlined by them. But I also do add that when DOT and Parks and the community board goes forward with these changes, that they sit down with the police and fire department and at least give them sufficient notice that we're not blocking their cars in and creating a problem for the community as well, because the community is parking here as well. So that's my report. That is my report on the action part of the committee. As I said, we had a lively committee meeting. The DOT didn't appear at this committee meeting, but they will be there in February. We attended. The committee attended the BQE meeting as our meeting, and as I said, that's the action part of my report. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate the update. More to come on the presentation from the committee. As I communicated, we'll have a walkthrough with the respective chairs and vice chairs, and then we'll have a chance to really dig down. I will say that the respective council members or member is fully aware and engaged in this, and ultimately what comes out of this will be at the direction of the council member. But again, once we have a chance to collaborate, coordinate thoughts, and do a little bit more fact finding, we'll come back to the entire board and not just the exec committee on what the next steps forward will be.
And I do recommend the police and fire department be advised to join us.
So next committee to report is youth education and cultural affairs.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. No co-chair. I'm Betty Flybush. We did not meet in December. We will meet this Wednesday. And in addition to having a presentation by Pratt about their community workshops and classes for young people in our area, we anticipate a lively discussion about the proposed Albee Square School. It's not proposed, it's going to come, it's going to open in September. It was originally designed to be an elementary school for District 13. And now there's talk about having a high school there for a few years. So we anticipate, as I said, a lively conversation about this. As many of you know, our community board too, and our committee has advocated for a long time for an elementary school in that site, in conjunction with the large numbers of housing and people moving into the downtown Brooklyn area. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Next committee to report is economic development and employment.
Good, thank you, Chair Singletary. Bill Flournoy, I'm the Chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee. My co-chair is Denise Peterson, and my secretary is Kathleen Gilman. Okay, as of last month, we had no meeting. Our speaker unfortunately never called us up and confirmed. So being that it was the 3rd, I did not want to have a meeting because he had nothing else on the agenda. Our next meeting is going to be February 3rd. And as Chair Singletary mentioned, we're going to be looking to start rotating the different bids into the committee agendas. So each committee has an opportunity to actually go into depth about what their needs are. Previously, we were having round robins where we have all the committees in at one time just before the statement of district needs, so we can actually do a itemized agenda items for each one of the different bids, so that we could actually bring it forth for the district statement of needs, so we know what they actually need. So that's going to be beginning, and I do appreciate that, Chair Singletary, because that's a great idea. Okay. In addition to that, beginning this Monday, January 30th, Wednesday, February 1st, and Thursday, February 2nd, the community board will have a virtual information sessions for all the community boards on cannabis dispensaries. Mr. Singletary, you mentioned that. And previously on April 5th of 2022, the different cannabis entities came to our committee and actually gave presentations about what they expected to go forward with cannabis dispensaries. And there has been some issues. There are only 2 legal dispensaries in the entire city. Every other cannabis dispensary you see is illegal. And the thing about this is the only individuals who can police this are the sheriffs, not the local police. They will aid in anything that the sheriffs actually decide, but they cannot police. Only the sheriffs can police. So I'm going to ask my committee members, since we've already reviewed this on the 4th, to now go to the meetings on either Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And then at the next committee meeting, we will then take a review of what they suggested and actually then decide what we think should be best for our district and put that forth to the board. Also on January 12th, I got an opportunity to get the Downtown Brooklyn Cultural District. Now they're going to, it's actually renamed L10 Arts and Cultural Center. Got actually an opportunity to actually walk through it, have a walkthrough on the actual development of that site. That site will be home for the Brooklyn Academy of Music, the Brooklyn Public Library, Makata, which is the Museum of Contemporary African Arts, and 651 Arts. In that space, you're going to have a cafe, exhibitions, rehearsal studios, cinemas, and multi-purpose space. We're talking 50,000 square feet. That is going to be, once they put that together, that site will be a draw point for everyone within the district. Okay, and right next to BAM, I think that's going to be phenomenal. And finally, at the Land Use Committee, I'm not going to steal your thunder, but the Downtown Brooklyn planning framework was to actually, it was a very elaborate presentation. And I think that's something that this district has been asking for. If anyone has an opportunity to check that out, I would strongly say, look at that video, okay, on YouTube. Okay, because that's something that's planning. I'm sure land use, okay, we'll go into more detail, Mr. Gordon. So that's been my, that's it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next committee to report is Finance and Personnel.
Thank you, Chair Singletary. My name is Leonard Jordan. I'm the chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee, and my co-chair is Mr. Brandon Smith. We will be meeting on Thursday, January 26th at 6 p.m. So I do not have anything else to report, Mr. Chairman.
We appreciate you for that brief report. You have no idea. Thank you. Next committee to report is Health, Environment, and Social Services.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm Chair of Health, Environment, Social Services. Delighted to have as my co-chair, Nicole McKnight. We had our meeting back at January 4th, and we heard about the liquor licenses at the general board, so I won't repeat that. But we did have a presentation at the beginning from Heights and Hills about their topic, opportunities to support Brooklyn's older adults. This is a community-based nonprofit with a mission to promote successful aging in the community. They have a case management program for adults who are over 60 years old, and they offer things like free lunch, support for Meals on Wheels, counseling, as well as other services. They encourage folks to support them through fundraising or advocating for their services within their communities. And it was really a delight to hear their presentation about their program. Separately, we had a meeting last Friday for the first time of a subcommittee focused on the health fair. And I'm delighted and excited to report today that we got approval from the Parks Department for a permit for the health fair, which is a great step and kind of the first big step in the process. The health fair will be June 10th at Commodore Barry Park in the southeastern area of the corner of Park and North Elliott, in the lawn/sitting area, and the adjoining walkway will be from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we'll be working with our great community partners, the Friends of Commodore Barry Park, as well as hopefully some other groups in the neighborhood to put together a really great quality event. And I really want to thank Barbara and her committee for having so many volunteers join from there, and encourage anybody else to reach out to me through the board office or otherwise if you're interested in getting involved in the health fair this year. It's going to be a fantastic event. Finally, I just want to note that at in the twilight hours of our meeting on January 4th, we had some information brought to our attention from the board office about renewal applications. Specifically, it was informed to us that when our committee votes, as we have for the past 10 years, to approve, at least to approve renewal applications, the SLA does not take note or action or even read our letters, our notice of approval. And the thought was posed about, well, how should our committee continue to address renewal applications? And I would be interested to hear Mr. Singletary's feedback on the issue. But my thought would be that while on the one hand you have clearly a circumstance where the SLA is not reading the letters of approval when they're sent, on the other hand, we've had several valuable discussions with members of the community and applicants over the past several years, where there have been concerns brought to our attention about different renewal applications. And I think with that in mind, and the fact that the applicants have seemed responsive and even attended the meetings when there've been such concerns expressed, what I would suggest is that we keep all of the renewal items noticed as we always have on the community board notice, that in the event, just as we always have, we ask members of the community at the meeting if there are any concerns about any of the renewal applications. If there are any concerns about a renewal applications, we hear those concerns and try to take actionable steps to follow up with them, as we have with other sorts of circumstances in the past. But if there are no such concerns, then we no longer take a vote on the matters on the licenses that have no concerns expressed about them. I think it would probably save the paper and the effort of the board office to send the letters when no one's going to read them in that circumstance. And in that circumstance, we would have at least validated that there were no community concerns about the renewal application status. So that would be my thought process. I'd be interested for your feedback, Mr. Singletary, and if you'd like me to take any other steps with it, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Brandon. I mean, oftentimes the committee is I hate to say it like this, but oftentimes the committee is one of the few platforms where the community can express their feelings about an establishment, either pro or con. And in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that we take that opportunity away from the committee or from the community, quite frankly. While I know the agencies have given direction for things that I think, to put it under the category of what they deem to be more efficient, I think what's efficient for us is to make sure we hear from the community. So perhaps, we can take this offline with your vice chair and your secretary and the board office leadership, and we can come to a method that works best for this new format, or let's say newly understood format, but also without taking away a voice in the community, because, I do my best to try to get to all the committees, maybe not with the same frequency as I would like, but there have been times where even when you haven't received feedback in a formal sense, when you open up the floor, somebody does say something and it's surprising. And so I'm a little hesitant about maybe if we go with if you don't hear anything or receive anything, sometimes it's just a matter of people not being made aware to the last minute. So I think knowing the board and you all as colleagues as I do, I don't think anyone would suggest that we take that voice away. But again, let's drill down after this meeting at a date to be determined where we can make sure we come away with a process that works with community board too and our community members.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. That concludes your report.
Yes, it does.
All right. Next committee to present land use.
Thank you, Chair Lenny. Wish to thank our co-chair, Dr. Christopher, who's been working hard, trying to come up with some ideas for affordable housing. And also thank Karen Johnson, our secretary, who's works very, very hard, balancing various things that she does in her business and private life, and does the minutes for us. And she got the minutes out today, and I thank her very much for that. Two matters came up at the meeting that we had last Wednesday. First, actually, and which wasn't scheduled but did come up, are the houses on 188 to 192 Duffield Street. Many of you may have passed it. It's right along the same block as the Oratory Church and the Brooklyn Deli, right by Willoughby Street. Those houses have been there for, well, decades, and they have been empty. Now, those houses were part of the general area for which became Metrotech, all the big, office buildings that we have over there, over by Myrtle, and you know where that is. Now, they were moved by Metrotech and owned by Metrotech to that specific location along Duffield Street, and you may have passed them again, right by the church. You may have passed and seen them for years. They have been empty and they still are vacant. There still is no one living in these buildings. We've been hearing some concerns about the deteriorating condition of these houses at going from 188 to 192 Duffield Street. It's four of them, various styles and types of housing along the historic buildings, and they have been sitting there empty. But now we're hearing that there's been deterioration, and we are really concerned about the possibility of deterioration. Now, we've also learned that Metrotech, which was the owner, I underline was, has sold those houses to somebody. We don't know at this time who's the owner of these properties, but we understand that there's new ownership of these properties. We're concerned that what's going to be done with these properties. Now, these properties are, from what I've been informed, landmark. Now, normally when we deal with landmark, we get the applications from Landmark Preservation Commission. In this instance, we've received nothing from the Landmark Preservation Commission. Instead, we're very concerned, and we wish what we did do was to discuss this matter. And we wish to bring to the attention of, I guess will be LPC and any other agency and anybody else who can do it, to try to protect and keep these homes from deteriorating. So what we had a discussion about this. It was also brought to our attention by an old friend of the community board, an old member of the community board, William Vinicom, who lives down the block from these houses. And he was telling us, and he's the one who came to our meeting on Wednesday. He voluntarily came, he was not scheduled, and he asked for our help. So we voted 11-0 to ask that that these, the deterioration of these houses be brought to attention, and also to try to keep them and to preserve them as well, to make sure that, and to find out in a way what's going on. So that's what we did. We had that discussion. It was not initially part of the agenda, but we did have a discussion to try to keep to keep the condition of these houses from falling apart any further, and to try to see if they can be protected. Now, the other matter that we did was a discussion that was on the agenda was it's a matter that's coming from the Department of City Planning, but it's part of an overall process which will involve the Brooklyn Hospital Center, Brooklyn, and Long Island University. There is a I guess general proposal for work to be done between these two institutions to try to, I guess not so much, it'll be some kind of expansion, obviously, but it'll be a joint venture or joint proposal that Long Island University and Brooklyn Hospital Center will enter into for, in a way, to make things bigger, I guess, but also to make things better for the community. Now, the shepherding of these proposals is being done currently by Department of City Planning. They were the ones who came to our meeting and gave us an extensive discussion. What they're looking to do is more than just these specific, let's say, discussion as to what these institutions want. Rather, it's to look at the community as a whole. And what they want to do at the Department of City Planning is to see the kind of effect these joint idea of Brooklyn Hospital Center and Long Island University will have on the community. The things that they're looking at is to see if perhaps as a result of this possible, let's say, joint venture, that there'll be an expansion of housing, affordable housing, we underline affordable housing, and there will be more in the work about jobs and its effect upon transportation, local transportation as well. So we had a very long and extensive discussion as to what may happen in the future over between Long Island University and Brooklyn Hospital Center. That was not voted on. There was no votes. There was no yes or no, although I think the committee is very interested and wants to be supportive of general things that will be of help to the community. So those are the two matters that we discussed at the Landmark Land Use Committee meeting last week.
Thank you, Carlton.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Next committee to report is Parks and Recreation.
Good evening again, Chair Singletary, Barbara Zoller Gringer, the co-chair of the committee. My longtime co-chair, Andrew Lastawecki, is on the call, and we're very grateful to our committee member, Thomas, who has been preparing terrific minutes for us. Now, we did not meet in January. We are working hard on planning our February 13th meeting, which tentatively is going to be a discussion about climate impacts on parks and hearing about the latest research on that. So please, it should be a great meeting. We're just putting it together. So mark your calendars, excuse me, for February 13th. I also was on that walkthrough along with Bill and other members of the committee, and BAM at least told us they are projecting to open in June. They were supposed to be open by now, but there have been all kinds of delays, as you might imagine. The whole space is truly impressive and will definitely be a terrific addition for the neighborhood and probably spur other development of a similar ilk. Other than that, just to follow up on Sid's report, we did hear a report at the Parks Committee And just not to get too technical, I don't think we actually transferred. I did report on this back at a on the presentation that we had a couple of months ago. I reported on that at the general meeting. We didn't really so much as transfer the matter to transportation, but there were certain issues that we've done this before on the board. Certain issues belong to one committee, certain issues belong to another committee. And clearly, when we did talk about it, there was a lot of support on the Parks Committee for improving Trinity Park. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, all of the committee chairs and co-chairs, and good to see you, Andrew. I owe you a phone call from last year. I'll call you soon. Next item on the agenda is executive business. Do we have any executive business for the exec committee this evening?
Well,
I'm not aware that we do, Barbara.
yeah, I just wanted to bring up a subject. I know it's not timely to institute a new calendar, but we talked about waiting until we had more people in the district office. But I know that we were very close to preparing a calendar, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate to, I'm certainly volunteering and willing to help work on that calendar to make it more final so that when we do have the opportunity to introduce it, that it would be ready to go. So I just wanted to raise that.
Thank you for your willingness. The calendar is ready to go. Once
Oh,
Tay
great.
and I finalize some other things like staffing, then we'll
Great.
we'll release the calendar.
Terrific. Thank you for that update.
You're welcome. Esther.
Did I miss it? Did we get another extension for the to remain on Zoom with the meetings?
We have an extension that Tay, I think, put out in the email a few weeks ago, but yeah, we do have another extension that's just allowing us to stay on this. I think it's for another 30 days. So I'm not sure what that 30-day period ends, but I believe it's somewhere close to the end of February. But
Okay, I didn't see that one. I knew it ended on January 20th. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we got another 30 days from there. So let's say February 20th for argument's sake.
Okay.
Yeah. So seeing no other executive business, I'm going to move over to community forum. This is where the community gets a chance to ask questions or engage. And I'm going to start with John Dew.
Good evening, all. Community Board 2. I had a couple of questions. First is about the weed license that is going to be administered by the Sheriff's Department. Are we expecting to get a formal policy and contact people who are responsible for that? This seems like it's a brand new process. It requires a whole bunch of work if it's expected to roll out with some degree of regularity. So I'm wondering to what extent we should expect to get work that tells us how that is supposed to go and what portion of oversight the local police departments are supposed to be providing.
So as we understand it now, to use John's Brooklyn translation, the weed licenses, but I think the city refers to as cannabis. But those licenses, I think, are a little still in a work in progress. I echo Bill Flournoy's comments. Right now, there are only 2 officially approved dispensaries in the city. And so while these other places are opening up shops and they're branding them as smoke shops, they're not officially legal to distribute cannabis in a form where people can just come in kind of a reckless fashion. I know that Taya has been working closely to get more information about this. Our information tells us that at this point, they're trying to use the SLA process as kind of a baseline to build from. And so we're not quite sure what that final product looks like. The Sheriff's Department is the law enforcement agency to help with enforcement. I don't know that they're actually designated with distribution or approval of who can have, different cannabis locations, but they are with the enforcement because it's too much of a burden, particularly at the rate smoke shops are popping up and other like entities for NYPD to take the lead there. And so a lot of this, as you highlighted, John, is fast and moving. It's all over the place right now, but what we've communicated as far as what we know, and we're still working closely with the Office of Cannabis Management to get a better understanding on how those applications will take place. And then is there a process where community members can speak? You know, is it a process where it's not within so many square feet of a school? You know, all those likely things that we would need to consider.
Thank you for that. I look forward to, and Myrtle Avenue is already inundated. We were inundated before it became legal. But there's a lot of movement now. Folks want to try and do right by the law, whatever that means. So we got a yeoman's job in front of the community in terms of making this legal and front and tender and fair and all the good stuff that should have been the case a long time ago, but it's here now. So we should do what we can to take advantage of it.
And John, let me just jump in real quick, just on the point that Mr. Dew is making. For those of you who are in the chat, Tay has put in a link, and it takes you to the Cannabis Interaction 101, and it specifically talks about cannabis licenses and community boards. So if you're not familiar with that, I was remiss in not mentioning that when I was answering John's question, but I think we all should get familiar with that. And Tay, what I ask, if you do me a favor, is instead of just having a link, could we send that actual attachment along with the different types of motions to all of the committee members as well? So those who don't get to the link can actually get the email as well for those write-ups. Sorry, John, back to you.
It was sort of disappointing to hear that the community board had been working for 10 years to make recommendations on liquor licenses that the SLA did not pay any attention to. So what is the mechanism for the community and the community board to notify SLA if indeed there is something that should be checked out or investigated going further? It just seems so unfair and unreasonable that it took 10 years for SLA to tell the community board that they don't read our letters.
Well, so I'm not going to say that they don't read the letters, but what I will say is, to answer your question, while I know there are different options that are presented to all the community boards on how the agencies engage, I've not heard anything that would change us from communicating the way we do when we hear from the community. If the community tells us something that is we deem material, or if we think it is in contrary to what the overall community believes is a benefit, or if there are things that we need to highlight and make top of mind for our agency, I'm not of the opinion at this hour to think that we need to change. And it would take a whole heck of a lot to make me say this. And I personalize it, since you all have elected me as chair, for us to do something different. And if it does come down to doing something different, we will discuss it amongst the exec committee. But right now, for things that the community tells us is a problem, we're going to communicate the same way as always and have a track record that that feedback has been registered.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
My final issue, and I always have a number of issues, but you had mentioned earlier that the community board should be making more recommendations. I have to go back to the open streets, where the community board too made a recommendation for Willoughby Avenue that included partial opening of the street.
Mm-hmm.
DOT did not accept the community board's recommendation. And unfortunately, the kids are back in school and the people are back at work. During the daytime hours where the streets are not fully occupied, the streets should be open so that folk can get their regular assessor ride and Uber services, as has been traditionally the case. How do we get DOT to recognize that the streets do not have to be open 24/7 when it doesn't call for the street to be open 24/7 because the kids are back in school.
Yeah, John, I mean, you know what's interesting in this topic comes up all the time. I mean, just on the side, I went to the precinct, 88 precinct community council meeting the other night just to wish success to Deputy Inspector Malcolm. And somehow or another, I got dragged into a open streets conversation. It wasn't even by me, I was a guest. But what I'll say is, we're not gonna give up. I'm indifferent, and quite frankly, nor do I care whether an agency is being responsive to us by the issue that the community brings before the CB2. If we take the approach of not receiving a response from an agency, while I think we all in spirit work as partners, sometimes there's politics that one may not be aware of, then we wouldn't get anything done. Our job is, when we hear feedback from the community, to keep promoting it, keep pushing it in a fair, transparent, equitable way with facts. Now, there are things people sometimes say or throw into a chat now that we're in a digital world that, quite frankly, is not true. It has no merit. It's really based on opinion, or sometimes it's based on someone's not having a clear understanding. But once we have a clear understanding, we meet those different categories that I just highlighted, it's incumbent upon us to continue to promote and push for those things and not give up. I mean, anything that has meaningful change in the world requires a lot of work. And my last statement has nothing to do with one's opinion on whether or not you feel open streets are good or not. I think everybody has a view. All we're going to do is take the feedback we get, be independent in our position, and continue to share it with the elected officials, whether that's the two council members that we sit in their respective district, whether that's the borough president, whether that's the different partner agencies we have, or if it means something that rises to the level of City Hall. But we'll just continue to keep sharing the information that comes from the community. And if we need to make recommendations, as I said in the outset, let's continue to make recommendations, but we do it that's fact-based and transparent.
Thank you, Chair Singletary. My final item
It's your
is
final, John.
on the green garbage bins that the city is supposed to be rolling out. Do we have any idea how that's supposed to work? And does it have any impact in Community District 2?
I know directly in Community District 2, we're starting to see composting bins. I'm not 100% clear on the schedule for the green bins. I would imagine that since this is a citywide initiative, it would have an impact on CB2. I'm not aware that we have a location for the distribution. If Taya has it, she would put it in the chat, but not seeing anything in the chat, it may not be anything that's been formally communicated yet. But as we get that information, we'll definitely share it amongst everyone.
Thank you, Community Board 2.
Any other questions or comments from community members?
Chair Singletary, Mr. Lastowski has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Lenny, that thing about the open streets, I've been talking about this and also with our council person and with Mr. Meyer. The streets are supposed to be open to all Lyft, Uber, taxis, accessorides, no matter what. 2, we've been begging for them to put signs up that will allow these drivers to understand that, because the drivers are afraid to come in because they're afraid of getting tickets or moving violation points. And that's why they won't come in. It's costing me extra money. If you know the configuration of 210, it's either between Vanderbilt or Clinton, and I have to guess where they're going to be. So I have to walk over and pay, the time that they're waiting for me to get down to them on the wrong side. 2, it's a very easy process to put wheels on those barricades on the bottom that would make it very easy for anybody to slip out of a car and move them. Right now, they're breaking down very fast, or somebody's putting tennis balls on the bottom. Wheels would be much better, but this has taken already for a year and nobody's doing anything about it yet.
Yeah, Andrew, so I appreciate those comments. As you well know, everyone on this everyone on this virtual meeting is fully aware of the multitude of positions people have related to open streets. Again, there are comments on both sides. While the term easy may be something that floats around from a conceptual perspective, the challenge is always the implementation. And I don't know that there's a difficulty or complexity to it. I think the implementation is doing something that satisfies the multitude of people who have interest in the open streets, and quite frankly, a form of communication and education that has to come from the city agencies. It can't come from us. So I think we've spoken about this topic ad nauseum. If we need to, we'll continue to do so, just not tonight.
Please,
So I
okay.
appreciate that. Next item on my agenda, not seeing any other comments from community members, is adjournment. I don't think I need a motion, but I'll say goodnight. Get home safe, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.